Pope Leo XIV has just made history. On June 5, 2025, he appointed Joseph Lin Yuntuan, aged 73, as Auxiliary Bishop of Fuzhou, China. This marks the first Chinese bishop appointed under the 2018 Vatican-Beijing Provisional Agreement, now renewed through October 2028. China's government recognized the appointment on June 11, sealing a move that could reshape dialogue between the communist state and the worldwide Catholic Church. Is Pope Leo continuing Francis's delicate diplomacy, or crossing a line? We unpack the story, its roots, and the fierce debate roiling faithful communities across China. 1. Historic context, Vatican-Beijing Deal, 2018. To understand today's appointment, we must go back to September 22, 2018, when the Vatican and Beijing signed a provisional agreement on the appointment of bishops, the first such arrangement since 1949. This was no mere diplomatic handshake, it was a bold gamble, balancing centuries of papal authority with the communist state's insistence on sovereignty in religious appointments. Why the deal mattered? The roots run deep. Since the 1950s, the Chinese Patriotic Catholic Association, CCPA, had appointed bishops without Vatican approval, creating a state church separate from the underground, the church loyal to Rome. The result? Two parallel Catholic communities, deep division, and widespread persecution. Enter St. John Paul II and Benedict XVI, who opened dialogue, seeking unity and pastoral healing. Pope Francis continued this patient diplomacy, believing unity would strengthen the faith amidst increasing Sinicization under Xi Jinping. The deal's key provisions. What did the secretive 2018 accord actually say? While the Vatican never released the text, insiders report that China submits candidate lists, and the Pope retains absolute veto power. 7 previously unapproved bishops were reconciled with Rome, marking a significant step forward. This was meant to preserve apostolic succession and heal wounds across dioceses still vacant after decades. Early results and roadblocks. But it wasn't smooth. Only a handful of bishops were appointed under the deal. Worse, China unilaterally installed bishops in 2022 and 2023 without Vatican consent, yet Pope Francis accepted them to avoid further ruptures. Critics cry betrayal. Cardinal Joseph Zen called it the killing of the real church, while supporters point to growing unity and ecclesial legitimacy. Why it still matters today? This context is essential to understanding Bishop Lin Yuntuan's appointment. It's not just personnel, it's the unfolding of a faith-led strategy with global resonance, balancing pragmatic diplomacy, religious unity, and spiritual mission within a repressive state system. As we move forward, that 2018 accord remains the defining framework for how the Vatican, and now Pope Leo XIV, navigate the delicate tension between papal prerogative and national sovereignty in China. 2. Who is Joseph Lin Yuntuan? Born in Fujian, on March 12, 1952, Joseph Lin Yuntuan has lived a life shaped by quiet courage. At 73 years old, he has just emerged from decades of hidden ministry to take public office as Auxiliary Bishop of Fuzhou, recognized both by the Vatican and the Chinese state. Seminary and priesthood in turbulent times. Lin entered the Fuzhou Seminary in 1979, during a fragile post-cultural revolution reckoning. He was ordained a priest on the 9th of April, 1984, embarking on parish work that saw him serve multiple communities, even teaching seminarians and managing diocesan affairs. Rising as a shepherd in the underground. From 1994 to 2003, Lin took on administrative duties, twice serving as Deputy Director of the Diocesan Economic Commission, and later as Diocesan Administrator. As state pressure mounted, he embraced clandestine leadership, ministering covertly to the underground faithful. Secretly consecrated bishop, 2017. On the 28th of December, 2017, under cover of darkness and risk, Lin Yuntuan was clandestinely consecrated bishop. Though unrecognized by Beijing, his episcopacy was valid in the eyes of the Vatican, a courageous step that solidified his role as a bridge between underground and official churches. From hidden to heralded, a turning point. For years, Lin led with quiet conviction. Then, on June 5, 2025, Pope Leo XIV appointed him Auxiliary Bishop under the Sino-Vatican Provisional Agreement. On June 11, Chinese authorities formally recognized his role. From secret consecration to state ceremony, his rise is nothing short of miraculous. Why his story matters. Lin embodies 3 generations of Chinese Catholic history, trained under oppression, ordained in secrecy, and now officially entrusted by both Rome and Beijing. His journey is a living testament to faith endured, unity sought, and a church reawakening in the modern era. 3. The June 5 appointment. On June 5, 2025, less than a month into his pontificate, Pope Leo XIV issued his first episcopal nomination under the Vatican Beijing deal, Joseph Lin Yuntuan, now Auxiliary Bishop of Fuzhou. This wasn't merely administrative, it was the new Pope's earliest, unequivocal signal that he affirms and continues the 2018 agreement initiated by Francis. A canonical first. This nomination is historic, it marks the first Chinese bishop appointed under Leo belief, demonstrating continuity with Francis's policy and reaffirming papal authority in the face of China's insistence on sovereignty over church nominations. The selection reflects a Vatican prudent choice. Lin was vetted and approved according to canonical norms, maintaining the pontiff's exclusive voice in episcopal elections. The diplomatic dance. Behind the scenes, this appointment underscores a deepening diplomatic strategy. Vatican and Chinese officials engaged intensively, with China submitting its candidate list and the Vatican affirming Lin, thus preserving the sensitive balance of shared influence, China's input, the Pope's ultimate veto. It is a delicate choreography that Pope Leo trusts enough to deploy early and publicly. Vatican reaction. The Vatican's bulletin celebrated the nomination, calling it a fruit of dialogue and a significant step in Fuzhou's communal journey. This framing positions Lin's appointment as not simply a bureaucratic transfer, but a spiritual renewal in action, uniting underground and state churches, and ministering in both the pastoral and civic spheres. Why does this matter? Because bishops aren't just clerics, they are linchpins of pastoral care, symbols of legitimacy, especially in communist China. By nominating Lin, Pope Leo sets a clear tone. He will defend Vatican claim to shepherds, sustain diplomatic reconciliation, and entrust individuals whose lives embody the Church's lived resistance and obedience. This June 5 appointment is as much theology as it is diplomacy. 4. June 11, civic recognition by the CCP. On June 11, 2025, just 6 days after Pope Leo XIV's nomination, Chinese authorities officially recognized Bishop Joseph Lin Yuntuan as Auxiliary Bishop of Fuzhou. For the first time under this new papacy, the state publicly endorsed a Vatican appointment, a landmark step signaling mutual trust and institutional cooperation. Civic takeover ceremony. At a formal ceremony, presided over by Bishop Vincent Shon Sailu and Archbishop Joseph Cai Bingrue, Lin took possession of his office. He pledged to abide by China's constitution, uphold social harmony, and follow the principles of syncretization in public ministry. Attendees included around 80 priests, 200 religious sisters, and representatives of the Patriotic Association and Religious Affairs Committee. Why it matters: diplomatic and ecclesial milestone. This is more than ceremony, it's state endorsement of Vatican authority. Previously, Beijing often pre-selected bishops. Here, Rome made the nomination, and China followed, reversing the usual order. According to Vatican spokesman, this civil recognition is a further fruit of dialogue and part of Fuzhou's journey of communion. Tensions beneath the ritual. Yet the agreement remains opaque, its text unpublished since 2018. The revival of episcopal naming under canonical norms is criticized by conservatives who warn of selling out underground Catholics. But the Vatican retains theoretical veto over candidates and sees this event as unlocking unity and pastoral stability among China's estimated 5 to 12 million Catholics. Signal from Beijing. By reciprocating the Vatican's initiative, China demonstrates willingness to work within the Vatican's diplomatic framework, even as it continues Sinicization policies throughout society. For the global Church, this tangible recognition of Lin is a beacon. Rome's authority is respected, and dialogue remains alive, potentially renewing hope for future visiting. And deeper ecclesial mission in the heart of Asia. 5. Who holds the power? Every bishop's appointment under the Vatican-Beijing deal raises the crucial question: who really holds the power, Rome or Beijing? At stake is not just one man's destiny, but the sovereignty of the papacy itself. China's seat at the table. Since 2018, China has been allowed to recommend candidates via the Chinese Catholic Patriotic Association. This breaks with decades of unilateral papal appointments, giving Beijing its first foothold in the spiritual realm. The text of the deal remains undisclosed, but most analysts agree China submits names for consideration. The papal veto, power on paper. Crucially, the Pope retains final veto power over any appointment, as confirmed by the Vatican and reiterated in renewals in 2020, 2022, and 2024. On paper, canonical authority remains intact. But in practice, critics point out that since the deal's inception, Rome has never used the veto, even when unilateral Chinese appointments occurred in 2022 and 2023. Contested balance or diplomatic realism. To critics like Cardinal Zen, this is an uneven trade. China gets input with little accountability while the Church risks capitulating to an authoritarian state. Yet defenders argue the compromise ends an ecclesial duality between underground and official communities, unifying dioceses and bringing pastoral clarity. What this means today. The Lin Yuntuan case underscores this delicate equilibrium. Beijing recommended Lin. Rome blessed him. The state then officially installed him. It's a tripartite confirmation, blending canonical legitimacy with civil legality. Pope Leo's decisive nomination, and China's swift endorsement, suggests the papacy is embracing strategic diplomacy, even at the risk of criticism from principled observers. 6. Strategic signals from Pope Leo. Pope Leo XIV, the first American pope and former missionary in Peru, has begun his papacy with a clear message. He intends to continue the approach of Pope Francis, especially in navigating delicate diplomatic terrain, including China. Rooted in Francis's legacy, Leo selected his regnal name in homage to Pope Leo XIII, signaling a return to social justice themes, applied now to modern crises like AI, labor rights, and global poverty. His explicit pledge to carry forward Francis's precious legacy, reaffirmed at his first meeting with the College of Cardinals, underscores a papacy marked by missionary outreach, synodality, and global dialogue. Diplomatic continuity with China. By appointing Joseph Lin under the 2018 Sino-Vatican Accord, Leo demonstrates that he's embracing Francis's model of pragmatic diplomacy. Analysts see this as consistent with the Vatican's past approach, where imperfect peace is preferable to perpetual conflict. It's a signal that Leo believes in active engagement with secular powers, trusting dialogue to preserve church unity. Facing the challenges head-on. However, Leo does inherit Francis's litany of diplomatic pressures, from unilateral Chinese bishop appointments during the interregnum to intensified religious repression across China. His early choice to acknowledge and engage tells us he isn't shying away, he's accepting the challenge and stepping forward. What it reveals about his papacy. This isn't mere continuity, it's conscious continuity. Pope Leo is doubling down on Francis's blend of pastoral outreach and geopolitical realism, a Vatican that listens, reconciles, and leads through presence, especially in places where faith and state clash. His first decisive move, Lin's appointment, reveals a pope ready to shepherd a church at the intersection of justice, diplomacy, and deepening global faith. 7. Unity versus compromise, cataclysm for underground church. The Vatican's 2018 deal with Beijing was framed as a bridge, but for many faithful in China's underground church, it felt like a collapse of the sanctuary. Critics warned that unity might come at the cost of betraying those who worshipped in secret under persecution. Cardinal Joseph Zen of Hong Kong famously warned the deal sends the flock into the mouths of the wolves, calling it an incredible betrayal. In the US, political figures like Nancy Pelosi echoed similar concerns, saying the Vatican seemed to cave to communist pressure, undermining the sacrifices of underground believers. Vatican's justification. For Rome, the calculus was pastoral, not political. The Vatican portrayed the deal as a path to unity, healing a division that left millions essentially second-class Catholics under state control. The renewal of the accord into 2024 was cited as evidence the strategy was bearing tangible fruit. Ground reality in China. But the underground community remains suspicious. Many priests and faithful remain worried about surveillance, coerced registration, and forced compromises on doctrine. Reports emerged that underground bishops were detained, their movements curtailed, while some state-appointed clergy had ties to the Patriotic Association or even family, stirring deeper anxiety. Balancing act. The Lin Yuntuan appointment exemplifies this tension. He was clandestinely ordained and served underground, but is now publicly installed under the new framework. His story is a microcosm of the deal's promise and peril, offering unity and legitimacy, yet walking a razor edge between faith and acquiescence. 8. Local impact, the faithful in Fuzhou. A moment of unity or pressure. June 11 witnessed a historic moment in Fuzhou. Bishop Joseph Lin Yuntuan, once hidden in the underground, was publicly installed and sworn in, pledging to uphold Chinese law and promote harmony, a sign of hope for divided Catholics. Yet this state-sanctioned recognition also intensified scrutiny on local underground communities. Mixed reactions among the faithful. An Asia research scholar described Lin's installation as a willingness to support reconciliation instead of antagonism. Many faithful see in him a living bridge, educated in the seminary, consecrated underground, and now embraced by both Rome and Beijing. Ongoing crackdowns on underground faithful. But the crackdown continues in Fuzhou. Reports document raids, forced shutdowns of churches, intense surveillance, and pressure to join the patriotic church. One underground congregation even hid its masses behind ancestral hall facades, only to be shut again. Voices from the underground. From Bitter Winter's reporting. It's like fighting guerrilla warfare with the Communist Party. The CCP forces us to join the CPCA against God's will. These poignant testimonies show a community torn, yearning for unity but wary of coercion. Hope amid uncertainty. Yet signs of resilience emerge. A Reddit user from Fuzhou shared, Fuzhou is certainly among the most free places in China to be Christian. The government gave recognition to the underground archbishop. Catholics here can worship mostly freely. This moment suggests cautious optimism. Lin's appointment may protect local faithful, offering legitimacy and warding off the harshest restrictions, though the battle for conscience continues. This appointment isn't just ceremonial, it's a turning point for Catholics in Fuzhou. It might unlock pastoral freedoms, but only if the underlying tensions, raids, surveillance, doctrinal pressure, are addressed with integrity and courage. 9. Broader diplomatic stakes. Bishop Lin's civic recognition on June 11 arrives at a pivotal diplomatic intersection. As Reuters notes, this step signals continued cooperation under the 2018 accord, yet uncertainties remain. Will this deepen Vatican-China dialogue, or embolden Beijing to assert control through unilateral bishop appointments? Signs of dialogue, but wiggle room for China. The Lin appointment reflects reciprocity. Beijing recommended, Rome approved, state recognized. Analysts like Michelle Chambon call it a willingness to support reconciliation. But with the accord's secrecy and past violations, 2022, 2023, China still possesses leeway to install bishops unilaterally, trusting Rome to acquiesce. Too much power for Beijing? Under the 2018 arrangement, Beijing proposes and the Pope may veto, but Rome has never exercised veto power, even when Beijing bypassed Vatican approval in prior years. Critics argue this soft posture empowers China, diminishing papal credibility and weakening underground Catholics. Balance or drift? Vatican strategy at work. Defenders say engagement is necessary. Even limited cooperation secures pastoral rights, unifies divided churches, and keeps dialogue alive, rather than leaving China's Catholics in isolation. Pope Francis and Leo see diplomacy as opening a pathway, eventually even a papal visit or embassy perhaps. What comes next? Will Beijing continue this model of tit-for-tat appointments, or will further unilateral selection strain the trust? Will Rome finally wield its veto? The Lin case sets a precedent, a moment of cautious reciprocity. But each future appointment becomes a test. Will diplomacy deepen, or will China push envelope, leaving the Vatican scrambling to preserve its spiritual authority? 10. What lies ahead? With the 2018 Sino-Vatican Agreement renewed in October 2024 for another 4 years, the pact now stands until October 22, 2028. This renewal marks both a pause for reflection and the opening of a critical window for China's 5 to 12 million Catholics. More bishops, more hope. Since 2018, around 10 bishops have been ordained under the deal, with tenures and appointments bringing structure to once empty sees. Vatican Secretary of State Parolin has expressed even stronger hopes, suggesting future ordinations could re-establish hierarchical communion and perhaps pave the way for a permanent liaison office in Beijing. Religious freedom on the front line. External activists like Human Rights Watch argue the Vatican should use the agreement to demand the release of detained bishops and defend religious liberty in tangible terms. Yet even under renewed dialogue, the CCP continues its sinicization campaign. Limiting youth religious education, removing crosses, and enforcing Xi Jinping thought in sermons. Tests ahead, vetoes and unilateral moves. The real litmus tests will be whether the Vatican exercises its canonical veto, as it's pledged, in the face of any unilateral episcopal moves by Beijing. China's past infractions, 2022 in Jiangxi, 2023 in Shanghai, were met with delayed Vatican acceptance. If Leo XIV chooses to assert veto, it could reaffirm Vatican sovereignty. If not, critics will again cry compromise. Future popes and diplomatic openings. The next 4 years could set a precedent: more bishops ordained, deeper pastoral engagement, and perhaps even the Vatican's long-sought associate office in Beijing. Success here would transform future papacy's approach from cautious engagement to sustained presence. But failure, marked by silence on freedom violations or unfettered CCP interference, could leave Beijing with unchecked sway, and the Church's moral authority greatly diminished. The renewal through 2028 extends both promise and challenge. Will ordinations flourish, fostering unity and pastoral care? Will religious freedoms truly expand? And can Pope Leo and future successors navigate the tightrope between diplomacy and dignity? The next chapter of this silent, spiritual struggle is unfolding, and its outcome will shape not just the Church in China, but the Vatican's global moral leadership. As we witness this historic moment, the first Chinese auxiliary bishop appointed under Pope Leo XIV and recognized by both Vatican and state, we stand at a crossroads of faith, diplomacy, and conscience. Bishop Lin Yuntuan's journey from underground shepherd to state-sanctioned bishop offers hope, but also calls us to vigilance. The path ahead will demand wisdom, courage, and steadfast prayer. Questions for reflection. What is more important, unity with the global Church or unwavering fidelity to prophetic witness? How should the Vatican respond if Beijing again bypasses canonical process? Will it use its papal veto, or continue to compromise? What tangible steps can global Catholics take to support underground believers facing repression? In renewing the 2018 Accord through 2028, what spiritual fruits must we pray for, and what red flags must we watch? Finally, as Pope Leo leads, how will future popes navigate the tension between diplomacy and doctrinal integrity? Let us pray for Bishop Lin, for unity rooted in truth, and for a Church that remains both tender and uncompromising, a faithful witness to the gospel in every corner of the world.